Well, most of us have had the experience where we're driving along, minding our own business, and all of a sudden we see flashing lights behind us. We pull over, and unfortunately, the flashing lights pull over behind us as well as we go, oh no, was I speeding? Did I run through a red light? And we go, man, I just can't handle this right now. And we see, and the cop comes out and, he talks to us, and then he pulls out his book of tickets, and we go, oh crap, a ruined day. Today we want to talk about cop accountability, the limitations of it, and how to move beyond it. Welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, like my buddy Matt, who often talks about sitting around with his Dunkin' Donuts coffee, I have my Tim Hortons coffee here to all you Canuck guys out there. So at some point I'll have to do some kind of comparison or blind taste test between Dunkin' Donuts and Tim Hortons. But I'm here and I'm thinking about driving and traffic cops, and it's kind of a sore point for me right now because I have 9 points on my Canadian driver's license, and that has cost me way too much money. If some of you are wondering how the heck did I get 9 points on my driver's license, well, you'd have to listen to an earlier podcast that would talk about my boneheaded move. But that's for another day and another podcast. And but most of us do not relish the idea of having the cops up, pull us over, and we're just going, man, this is just a horrible scenario. And I would say that most of us, when we approach the area of accountability, we often have the same approach to it. It's this punitive kind of thing. We often view our accountability partner as a bit of a cop, and as a result, it's just not very effective in our lives. So today I want to be really clear. I have stolen this concept and these ideas from Michael John Cusick in his great podcast, Restoring the Soul. He actually does 3 podcasts on this topic. I'm going to give you a bit of a Cole's Notes version from a bad driver. And we're going to talk about 3 different types of accountable relationships. The first one is cop accountability. The second one is coach accountability. And then the final one is cardio accountability. And again, this information stolen from him. He's a great guy. I've interviewed him on a podcast. His book, Surfing for God, I still think, certainly from a spiritual angle, is the best book I've ever read on porn addiction and a lot of practical things as well. I've just benefited so much from his podcast and his book. So again, a good shout out to Michael John Cusick. But let's talk about these 3 types of accountable relationships. And the first one, most of us have experienced this idea of cop accountability. And most of us start here, we're often caught in our behavior or caught in our lies. And someone says, well, you need to get into an accountable relationship. What they mean by that is you need to get together with somebody who holds your feet to the fire, somebody who keeps you from repeating this bad behavior. So this is the way it works. For example, they often, sometimes in cop accountable relationships, they have a list of questions and they go through and ask us all sorts of questions about our behaviors that week. Maybe if we're with Covenant Eyes, they would have a copy of our report. And so we'd get together with them on a regular basis and we would check in. And these questions that they ask us or this report that they see is meant to snap us back into good behavior. or to keep us on the right path, knowing we're going to be asked these questions each and every week. And you go, well, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a good deal, and it has some merit, but there's also limitations to it. One of the reasons is I think it relies on shame to snap us back into right behavior. To have the guy sit across from us and essentially goes, dude, like, what's your problem? I thought you said you were going to call me before you acted out. Or you said you would call me if you felt tempted. Or you said you would deal with this weak device or this weak link in your life. And it's just an incredibly shame-producing situation. And I've said this so many times with guys. I said, if just feeling bad about our behaviors would snap us into good behaviors, I mean, heck, we would have changed years ago because we felt bad about these behaviors for years. Now, I think something, for example, like a Covenant Eyes thing on your computer, which I have, for example, I think that's a good thing. It can slow down our behaviors or maybe give us a second thought, but it will never stop us from acting out. Here's another limitation, I think, to cop accountability. Cop accountability, in order for it to really work, requires honesty and full disclosure. In fact, Cusick says that disclosure is the currency of cop accountability. And the challenge is most of us are pretty good at lying, either by saying something that isn't true or leaving out things to make us look slightly better, only to share 90% of the story. Well, how long were you looking at porn? I don't know. I clicked on it for a while and then I got back to work. Well, we could have been on it for hours and hours, kind of thing. And we often tend to subtly lie. And it's just this instinctive reaction because we don't want to get into trouble. We don't want the cop sitting across from us to write us a ticket. Now, I've managed to talk a few cops out of giving me tickets, but more often than not, I end up getting a blue ticket sitting on my dashboard. The other thing is we often feel like there's going to be consequences. Well, they're going to write me a ticket and I'm going to get in trouble and I'm going to have these consequences. And if so, of course, I'm not going to volunteer any information that would make me look bad. I've even had guys say, well, I'm so glad they never asked me that question because then I would have either had to lie or tell the truth. But you go, well, think about it. You're actually withholding information unless somebody asks the specific question. What kind of accountability is that? Now you might say, well, it sounds like cop accountability focuses primarily on external behaviors. And you would be right there. Of course, your Covenant Eyes report or those questions are all going to focus by and large on external behaviors. What did you do this week? Now that can be a start, but what happens if our addictive behaviors have an embedded root or deep roots that go way down into our lives? Well, any sort of cop accountability is going to be half effective at best. I think the biggest limitation with cop accountability is this. It results in the offending partner subtly offloading the responsibility onto their accountability partner. Well, they just haven't been checking my reports, or they never asked me the exact question until I had to tell them the truth. In other words, it's up to my accountability partner to hold me accountable. And you're just going, wow, that doesn't sound very effective. And the reality is that it isn't. It's a start, but it only takes us so far. You say, well, is there ever a place to use cop accountability? And I would say there is a time and place. If, for example, let's say you have somebody who has been acting out with porn or cheating or visiting, sexually off bounds places or whatever it is, and let's say the guy continues to act out, he minimizes what he's doing, he's always sidestepping the necessary steps that he needs to take place. Well, somebody, if it could be his wife or it could be a close friend, is going to say, I have no other option. For example, many guys won't get help until they lose the keys to their house. Guys living back with their parents or in a basement suite. Well, that's a degree of cop accountability. And sometimes the wife just goes, this is never going to change. It's like that saying, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And I hate to play this role, but sometimes a wife will go, I feel like I'm playing like the mother role here or the cop role, and this guy that I'm married to is acting more like the rebellious child. But I have no other tools in my toolkit. Maybe sometimes you have a friend and you look at his life and you go, dude, you're like screwing up your life. You're going to end up on your own. And it is important for us to get in someone's face and in one sense, pull them over and turn the lights on and go, man, if I don't play the cop, you're just going to destroy your life. So cop accountability can be a starting place, but hopefully it doesn't end there. I would say where we want to progress to is what Cusick calls coach accountability. And coach accountability can happen when you, for example, have come to terms with, the fact that you do have a problem, maybe even the depth of it. You've learned to disclose honestly with other people. And now what happens is you can bring somebody into your life to come alongside you to help you with skills and tools. It could be, for example, like a sponsor in AA, they would employ this, or a sports trainer who comes along, a motivated guy, to help them find success in their athletic talents. So, for example, if you have a coach, and let's say you're wanting to become a better tennis player, so you might hire a coach to help you with your tennis serve. Mine always sucked, and the guy just waited and just slammed it back at me. My second serve was so bad, but I needed a good tennis coach along with that line. Now notice where the focus of responsibility is. I noticed, I was honest, and I realized I had a problem, and as a result, I took responsibility and didn't offload it to another person. As a result, a coach could come alongside of me and he could give me specific information and help in order for me to be more effective in walking out what was already my desire. A big step for me was getting a recovery mentor. And that's where I think was a big part, I've shared this on other podcasts, was a big part of what I call my recovery tipping point. My buddy Michael Leahy describes and uses the term a Sherpa guide. And if you're going to climb Mount Everest, which seems overwhelming, which it probably is for me, but if I ever decided to, I would not just try to climb it on my own. Once I got to base camp, I would try to find somebody, and you could hire somebody who has actually been to the summit, who has experienced success in that journey of making it to the height of Mount Everest. That's what coach accountability looks like. And a good Sherpa guide not only can work with external behaviors, but they can also give you some practical tools around some of the internal dynamics that trip you up. You've all heard of the addiction acronym HALT, H-A-L-T. It means hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And other people have different examples and letters they add to that. I throw on stressed and horny and anxious, and there's a whole bunch of ones that I throw in there when I'm working with guys. And what they really do is they're helping us identify what is sort of this embedded situation where we just have this stimulus and then we immediately react and respond. And they help us maybe intervene in that, understand what's going on, and they can begin to help us change the trajectory of that. A good coach can also inspire us. We've all started, most of us who are getting coaches or joining groups or getting individual coaching, most of us are at a point where we have a level of commitment. But at the same time, we can find, and I found that commitment wanes. It tends to ebb and flow. And a good coach can help us keep our eyes on the goal and not become discouraged in the process. You see, in the previous scenario, the cop accountability, the currency of that was, of course, disclosure, honesty, humility. But in the coach model, I would say the currency is more of inspired ownership. They inspire you, but you're also taking ownership along the way. A coach gets at both our skills and our motivation to change. Here's an example of some good coaching questions that Cusick threw out that I thought were helpful. What losses have you experienced as a result of your porn struggle? What does it cost you emotionally, physically, professionally? See, that question would be a good coach question because it gets at our motivation to change, our big why, and then it also begins to look at removing some of the blockages along the way. In what emotional states do you find yourself especially tempted? Would be another good coaching question. So those are the first two, cop accountability. The second one is coach accountability. Now, the last version of accountability is what Cusick calls cardio accountability. And of course, cardio referring to the heart. And this is, but of course, because cardio starts with C and any good communicator has to practice alliteration, have everything starting with the same letter. But cardio or heart accountability. And this is the idea here. You see, all sexual compulsion and addiction is about false intimacy. So in this stage, we're dealing with connections and we're helping somebody to begin to connect with their heart, their deeper motivations. You could say at this point, we're looking under the hood, we're popping the hood, and we're looking at issues around the thriving of our heart and our soul. And it does require a certain amount of skill. It requires from us a certain amount of digging in. You know, what is going on in our hearts? What are our longings, our pain, our unmet needs, our dreams, our desires, our disappointments? You see, a cardio coach, a cardio accountability partner can help you look at some of those questions, some of those reasons that drove you to porn as your favorite medication. Now, not many men may get here, but I think that's absolutely crucial if we're going to truly slay the dragon of what is behind some of our compulsions. They've said that perhaps the most difficult journey most of us will ever face is the journey inward. Now, I'm not a therapist. I don't pretend to be one, and I don't think a person needs to be a therapist necessarily. You know, oftentimes in my group, we will discuss some of these questions. And it's often interesting as we can partly situate ourselves in the stories of other people that we can get a handle on our own story. Now, occasionally we'll have we'll have guys that will hit real blockages in their recovery. Something happened in their past. There could have been abuse there, or there could have been some real issues, trauma issues that just keep them stuck. And I'm the first one to say, dude, you need to go to a therapist and begin to walk through some of those things. I'm not trained for that. But oftentimes, just good question asking can help us look inward. Just listening to the stories of other people can really help us look backward. I had an interesting, just kind of a personal discovery the last little bit. I was listening to Cusick's podcast, and he described this. He said, to be an unwanted child or a child that wasn't valued. He was describing that as one of the sort of things that can happen, and for some reason, just that choice of words really hit me, and I realized I've shared in my earlier story about being growing up between two children in a large family. Both of those children on either side of me had some larger, more pressing needs, I guess. And I just felt like I disappeared in my family. I heard years later that apparently, I never heard this from my parents, but apparently my dad only wanted 3 kids, and I was child number 4. And I don't know if I somehow internalized that, whatever, but it was that unwantedness. And the challenge was porn for me, and porn stars, and a woman who was willing to undress for me and be vulnerable to me and want me. That met some deep need in my life that made me feel wanted and valued. Now, if I don't deal with that, if I don't understand that at a heart level, I'm a sucker for any woman, whether that's virtual or real, who claims that they want me, who pours attention on me, who shows me or tells me that I am desired. It's almost like my heart is a bit of a dry sponge looking for water in that way. If we don't deal with that, if we don't get to the why of some of our acting out, we can become, through white knuckling it, we can become like a dry drunk, where we just change our behavior on the outside. A good heart or cardio coach can help you get not just to the what, but the why. And again, I've seen men, and part of my own journey is coming to understand some of those deeper reasons. Again, I don't think you need to be a therapist. I just think you just help guys process the roadblocks as they become aware of them. And if needed, then you pass people on to trained professionals. So here's an interesting, some questions that Cusick throws out that you could ask at this level, being a cardio coach. Why do you think you struggle with porn? What is the legitimate emotional need that you're trying to meet with your porn use? Where do you feel most alive as a man? Where do you feel most inadequate as a man? What are you looking for from women? Where have you been wounded? Do you ever feel lonely in a crowd? Those are good examples. For guys that have a spiritual background, you could also move into those areas as well. You can say, do you ever feel restless in your soul, and what do you do with that? Do you find it hard to be still? If God's part of your landscape on an average day, what do you think God thinks about you? Again, those are all heart questions. Well, 3 types of accountability: cop accountability, coach accountability, and cardio accountability. I found it interesting. A couple weeks ago, I shared this idea of the intimacy pyramid that had intimacy at the top. Under that was vulnerability. Under that was trust. Under that was safety. And at the very bottom was truth and honesty. And it's interesting, Cusick shared a similar, I don't know if he put it in the form of a pyramid, but it was a similar idea. At the very top, he put down accountability. Or a word he actually prefers to accountability is connection. You could almost put intimacy there. And this is what he put underneath it. He said, under that, you have vulnerability. Under that, you have trust. Sounds familiar? Under that, you have courage. And under courage, you have faith. Now, faith in this situation, I don't think is particularly religious in nature. It's just faith in another, and perhaps a belief you can't do it on your own. But if you're going to reach out, you have to have faith to believe that somebody can help you. I like that progression. It starts with the desire or the faith to reach out, and then eventually at the very end can lead to deep connections with other people. Again, I hopefully have made the point over and over again that you're going to need those connections to be successful in your recovery journey. Talking about connection and good forms of accountability, again, I want to put the plug in for both individual and group coaching that I offer guys. If you want more information, you can email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. We presently have a Saturday morning group that we're folding guys into. That's at 8 a.m. Saturdays Pacific Standard Time in the morning. And there's other groups that we're starting as well. So again, until next time, here's to faith and courage to open your life up to another person. God bless.